How many people here are concerned about eating genetically modified foods? Oh, my people. How many people here at one point decided to switch to non-GMO or organic? Raise your hand. Again, my people. Now, how many, see the thing is there's a confounding factor here because some of you made that switch when you adopted not just organic, but an entirely different way of eating. I don't want to talk to you. And this question, it's for those that continued with the other way that they were eating, but just switched to non-GMO and organic. For those of you who made that change, first of all, how many did that? Raise your hand. 7. It's hard to get. So I'll make the conclusion. At 150 lectures, I have asked this question. And I say, what did you notice in your health? What did you notice in your health? I'm not going to do it here. Because right now, this becomes, if in this crowd, it becomes not just organic and non-GMO, it becomes raw and implants and this and that. It's a lot of different things. But in the 150 lectures out in the public, including a couple of dozen medical conferences, where they were talking about their patients who they put on organic diets, people were having amazing recoveries, amazing dramatic turnarounds. Now, I have to say, I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, that for years people would come up to me and say, I can tell when I eat a GMO. And I'm like, didn't really believe them. And I was speaking about how rats, within 10 days on a GMO diet, had potentially precancerous cell growth in their digestive tract, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, damaged immune system, in 10 days. And yet when people came up and said, I can tell the difference, I'm like, really? How do you know it's GMO? So the way I got enlightened about this issue was through the doctors. I went to doctors' conferences starting in 2006 and started giving them the compilation of all we knew about the health dangers of GMOs. And what did they do? They started prescribing non-GMO diets. And the next year I came back and I told the GMOs associated with inflammation, or the GMOs associated with cancer, or the GMOs associated with this or that, because they have their medical themes. And I was able to describe how GMOs and the Roundup sprayed on GMOs was related to all those diseases. And again, they were prescribing non-GMO diets. So at the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, they invited me back year after year, and then they wanted to give me a prize for environmental medicine. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I'll take the prize. And so I went there with a video camera in 2009, which was like the 4th time I was going to give a talk to this group. And I started interviewing the doctors. Now, up until this point, I was representing scientists. How many people here are scientists? 1, 2, a couple. I'm going to make fun of you now. I apologize in advance. Do you know how scientists talk? Converging lines of evidence suggest that I might be chilly. They don't actually say things with definite proven and this and that, but the doctors were completely different. The doctors were saying GMOs cause inflammation. But allergists said, GMOs make my patients have greater allergic reactions. And they were not mincing their words. And one woman said, I put all my patients on a non-GMO diet and they all get better. And I said, can you say that again? And she said it again. And I said, what percentage get better? She said, I just told you they all get better, 100%. All right, 98%. I said, how many patients have you put on a non-GMO diet? And she thought about it, and she thought about how many years she's been doing it and how many patients she sees per week, and she did some multiplication. About a minute later, she emerged and said about 5,000. Now, this blew me away, because I realized this doctor had experimented on more humans than the scientists had experimented on rats and mice. She had a bigger group. So I actually said, can I go to your clinic and interview your patients? And she said, sure. And sure enough, one patient, 3 days into the diet, their Crohn's disease symptoms stopped, her hair stopped falling out within 28 days, changed, the skin improved. There was someone who had IBS, 3 weeks, no longer. Another one, 6 weeks, no longer. Kid with sharp pain. I interviewed nurses who had changed. But you see, there were confounding factors there because some of them were now eating non-processed food, going from boxed processed foods to non-processed foods. Who am I to say that it's the GMO? Could be so many other things. I started interviewing farmers at the same time. And the farmers were taking pigs and cows and putting them on a non-GMO diet. There were no gluten-free pigs, no dairy-free cows, and the pigs and cows were getting better from the same thing that the people were getting better from. And the same thing as the pets, pet owners and pet veterinarians. The pets were getting better. And when I started in 2012 asking audiences, what did you notice? And then I would say, okay, someone would mention something, and I would say, okay, how many people noticed that? Someone else would mention something else. How many people noticed that? I watched a pattern emerge. The number one most significant improvement always was digestion. Number 2, I combined increased energy and reduced brain fog. Then there was anxiety and depression and weight gain and food sensitivities and pain. I remember in one large lecture, a woman from the back yelled out, "Erectile dysfunction!" Instantly, without a thought in my head, I said, okay, raise your hand if you had erectile dysfunction. It was absolutely clear, repeated over and over again, 150 lectures. So we actually sent out a survey at the Institute for Responsible Technology to members and said, okay, if you noticed a change, let us know. And 3,256 people responded. All 28 conditions that we listed, which we had heard from audiences, were actually demonstrated that they did show improvements. And what was the number one reported improvement? Digestion. What percentage of the people do you suppose said that the digestive health got better? 85%. 85%. Not minor improvements. I looked into the data, and over 80% of those people were either significant improvement, nearly gone, or completely recovered. We'll show you a list of some of these reported improvements, but it was so dramatic. What's interesting here is that we have the list of diseases and disorders. We have the list of what the veterinarians and the livestock farmers and the pet owners were describing for livestock and pets, and it's the same. We have the animals that are force-fed GMOs and Roundup in laboratory experiments, and it's usually short-term, so they don't often get the full-blown disease or disorder, but they get the precursors. And as you'll see in a few minutes, we know the modes of action of GMOs. The Bt toxin, which is the insecticide produced by corn, and the Roundup, which is sprayed on most GMOs, we know that the modes of action would predictably lead to these different diseases and disorders. And what I'll show you are the charts of about 30 different diseases rising in parallel with the increased use of GMOs and Roundup. This is amazing news. This is an alarm because people realize that the GMOs and that the Roundup in the food supply may be driving up diseases like nothing else. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you those charts now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what could be causing those problems, and then I'm going to talk about what could be even worse, the new GMOs. But I'm going to give you, I have to lighten the mood a little. I don't like death, disease, destruction, despair, goodbye. Brian mentioned I've been working on this for 20 to 25 years. And what we have been doing is exposing these dangers. And when I looked at it in 1996, when I first heard about the dangers of genetic engineering from a genetic engineer blowing the whistle, I thought, what's the strategy here? Monsanto has billions of dollars, we have $1.95. They run the government, they run the media, they're controlling the farmers, they give money to academia, they have them locked down. We can reach out to consumers. Now, if consumers learn about the health dangers, they will choose not to eat the GMOs. That will put economic pressure on the food companies to remove them. What was working to our advantage was that there were no consumer benefits from GMOs. No one sought, I'd like my Cheerios with GMOs, please. Can you add Roundup to that? No one wanted it. It was to kill weeds. Just for those people who are completely lost, let me tell you what a GMO is. Genetically modified organism. Typically you take a gene from one species and you force it into the DNA of another species. Bacteria or viruses forced into soy or corn, primarily to render that crop invincible to a normally deadly weed killer. So Roundup ready soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa, they're all invincible to Monsanto's Roundup. Who makes the seeds? Monsanto. Monsanto's now bought by Bayer, so it's now Bayer, the aspirin maker, that bought Monsanto. What a dumb idea that was. So we have the GMOs and the Roundup in the food supply. And so we have been educating people. Now, when you think about it, the strategy here is, do we need to get 51% of Americans to be avoiding GMOs in order to win the battle in the marketplace? Will Kraft Foods wait till they've lost half their market share to make a change? No. I see your hands. It's like, no, it's not the case. Do you remember when Classic Coke changed its recipe? It had dropped like 2 percentage points in market share. All we needed was a small percentage. The mathematics was on our side. So who do we go to? Moms, health-conscious shoppers, people who are sick, religious people who think GMO means God move over. Yes, I thought of that. 45 minutes with it's like 45 minutes with a friend of mine in a diner. It's like, what are some other words for GMOs? So we decided to go to the most receptive audiences, the most receptive places in the United States to get the numbers that we needed. And we got the numbers. 46% of Americans now say they're seeking non-GMO, and that is way more than we need. It's happening. So I remember traveling on an airplane 5 years ago or something, and I was on United, and they get live stream from DirecTV. So I never watched it, but I went, oh, turn on the TV. So I turned on the TV, and it comes on a commercial from Bayer ice cream saying, no artificial hormones. I've been working against genetically engineered bovine growth hormone for years. It was kicked out of most American dairies, but not Bayer. So I turned it on. I know, wasn't it great? So I turned on, there was the commercial, and then I turned it off and go, okay, that's why I needed to watch that TV. Then a year later, turned on the TV, again, on an airplane, and it was Nestle's advertising that their coffee creamer was non-GMO. In the middle, just started the commercial, turned it off afterwards. It was like, it's happening. I mean, how many times do you go and you see little butterfly, the non-GMO Project Verified? It's all over the place. There's $30 billion worth of food being sold with that butterfly. There's like 50,000 different products in the supermarkets with that butterfly. So we are in a great space. We are successful. And so What I'm saying is, when I started 23 years ago, no other nonprofit wanted to talk about the health dangers. They wanted to talk about the environmental problems. They wanted to talk about the concentration of power of food in a handful of companies, farmers' ability to save seeds, patenting life. And I'm thinking, guys, you have 3 or 4 sentences about the health dangers. Thank you for adjusting. 3 or 4 sentences. We need a book. We need lectures. We need to train people. So I wrote a book. I created lectures. I trained people. And we created a movement around behavior change messaging aimed at the most receptive people that worked, and we are winning. So let's take a moment and appreciate that we can do it. We can do it. I'll give you the new GMOs and the bad news in a few minutes. So I'm giving you this good news because I'm going to show you these charts, which are devastating when you think about when you look at a chart, let's just go to one quickly. I'm going to go past a bunch of them. All right. How do you like my lecture so far? All right. So these are the 28 different conditions that we found at the survey. So digestive problems, 85%. Fatigue, 60%. Remember, fatigue, energy, just like when we asked the question. Overweight or obesity, 54%. Brain fog, 52%. Anxiety and depression, 51%. Food allergies and sensitivities, 50%. All above 50%. Now we have memory and concentration. We have memory and concentration. That was a joke. Thank you very much. We have joint pain, seasonal allergies, gluten sensitivity, insomnia, skin conditions, hormonal problems, musculoskeletal pain, autoimmune disease, eczema, blood pressure, asthma, menstrual problems, diabetes, other mental disorders besides allergy, anxiety, depression, underweight, cancer, kidneys, infertility, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. All of these were mentioned to me live and in person in these lectures and then repeated in this survey. And many of these are also found in lab animals, livestock, humans. Now we're going to get to the charts. So, I'm obligated to say this because it's true. Just because there's 2 different slopes that seem to align does not mean that one causes the other. But when you have all this other information, you have plausible causative pathways. In other words, we know why these diseases occur. When you see the recoveries, when you see the lab animals, then these correlations are very important. So this is inflammatory bowel disease in the United States. Those are the bars. The red is the amount. Glyphosate is the chief poison in Roundup. And so they measured how much of the glyphosate-based herbicides are sprayed on corn and soy in the United States. When do you spray GMOs? When do you spray corn and soy? On GMO corn and soy, you spray the heck out of it. So it's another way of determining not only the glyphosate levels, but also percentages of GMO in the soy and corn. So I'm going to go through 30 charts in 90 seconds. I will read the name of the disease. You look at the slope, right? This shows you that when the amount of glyphosate started to take off, the disease started to take off. This is intestinal infection deaths. This is peritonitis, which is an inflammatory digestive order disease. This is death due to kidney failure. That also has the percentage of GMO soy and corn in the blue. This is hospitalizations from kidney injury. This is hepatitis C. 6-year-old prevalence of autism. Now there's a little typo. It should say R equals 0.9972. If it's 100% correlated, it's 1. This is 0.9972. This is different than all the other charts because they wanted to see what was the accumulated impact of multiple years of glyphosate. So they took not only the same year, but the previous 3 years, and they put them all together, and the correlation was much higher. So by the time the child is 6, this represents the amount of glyphosate sprayed in the United States over the previous 4 years. And it was nearly a perfect correlation. Diabetes, stroke deaths, dementia, deaths from senile dementia, deaths from Alzheimer's, deaths from Parkinson's, deaths from obesity, deaths from hypertension, anemia, insomnia, sleep disorders, celiac, birth defects, lipoprotein metabolism deaths, anxiety, suicide by overdose, schizophrenia, ADHD. In 2015, the World Health Organization declared glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. Last month, or 2 months ago, they found that when you put glyphosate and you expose to breast cancer cells from mice, nothing happens unless there's another molecule. That other molecule is found in every human being, and it multiplied the breast cancer cells. This is glyphosate and breast cancer. Bile duct and liver cancer, kidney and pelvic cancer, urinary bladder cancer, thyroid cancer, deaths from leukemia. If you want to know more, well, I'll talk about this in just a second. So you can see it's a sobering list. The slopes are there with each one. Maybe it's something else, but I don't think so. I think that there's a big contribution from GMOs and Roundup. For example, let's just take a look at what GMOs and Roundup might do. The process of genetic engineering creates massive collateral damage in the DNA. So it can change the levels of expression, turn on genes that were silent, shut off genes that were expressing, and completely mess up what's there. So you can have new allergens, higher levels of existing allergens, new toxins, higher levels, anti-nutrients, carcinogens. That's why I named my second book Genetic Roulette. It's basically whatever happens. And they don't check for those changes. Long after genetically modified Roundup-ready corn was on the market, independent scientists decided to compare that corn with the original non-GMO corn and found over 200 different levels of metabolites and proteins, including higher levels in the GMO corn of, check out these names, cadaverine and putrescine. They're responsible for the foul odor of rotting dead bodies. They're also linked to bad breath, and they're in higher levels in the corn. But it's also linked to allergies and cancer. There's a new allergen in Monsanto's BT corn. What is BT corn? If you gather certain soil bacteria and you spray it on crops during times of infestation of certain pests, the pests will eat it, and it'll bore holes in their guts and kill them. It's called BT, for Bacillus thuringiensis, the name of the bacteria. You can buy it at a garden store and spray it, and it says, do not take internally. Duh. But the biotech industry decided to give it to all of us internally. They took the gene that produced the BT toxin, made it more potent, inserted it into corn, and it's now in every cell of their BT corn plant, and it produces a toxin that drills holes in the guts of insects to kill them. When you spray the BT on, which they do even in organic agriculture, it biodegrades in a couple of days. It washes off in the rain. When you put it in a GMO, it's encapsulated. and it's thousands of times more concentrated. And when they expose the Bt toxin to human cells in a petri dish, it poked holes in those cells, the exact same holes that it creates in insects. So we're eating the Bt toxin. In Canada, they took blood that was preserved and found Bt toxin was in the blood of 93% of the pregnant women tested. And in 80% of the cord blood, which means it was in the unborn fetus. The Bt toxin is toxic to red blood cells. How did the Bt toxin get into their blood? Maybe it poked holes in the cells, creating a kind of a leaky gut, and got through those holes. Question, why would 93% of the pregnant women have Bt toxin in their blood? Because it should wash out. It's not Mexico where they eat corn tortillas all the time. Most of the corn eaten in Canada, this was a Canadian study, doesn't have the Bt toxin because it's highly refined. There's no toxin, protein in corn syrup, corn sweeteners. The people who ran that study guessed that it might be the milk, meat, and eggs from animals that eat the Bt corn every day and have a reservoir in their system. But there's another theory. There was concern that if we eat a GMO, genes that were inserted into that food might transfer to our gut bacteria or to our own DNA. So in the only human feeding study ever done on genetically modified commercialized food, which is crazy, was one meal. They took people who had colostomy bags. They had their lower intestines removed, not for the study. And they fed them genetically engineered soy, and they were surprised to find how much intact genetically modified DNA ended up in their, it was actually ileostomy bags. Because it was supposed to be broken down during digestion, because that's what Monsanto promised. But in 3 of the 7 human volunteers, even before they were fed the meal, the gene that was inserted into the soybean that created Roundup resistance was embedded and integrated into the DNA of the bacteria in their guts. This was in 1998 in the UK. Hardly anyone was eating a bunch of GMOs, but 3 of the 7 had it. We don't know if it's widespread, if we're colonizing our gut bacteria with GMO genes. Now it's not that you create Roundup when you have Roundup resistance. You create a protein that allows Roundup to be sprayed on you, and it doesn't kill whatever. But what if you eat corn chips from Bt corn that produces Bt toxin from genes in the corn chip, and that corn gene transfers to your gut bacteria and continues to produce Bt toxin 24/7? If we are producing Bt toxin in our own gut bacteria, and no one knows, that might explain why 93% of the pregnant women tested had it in their blood, because they may have been producing it inside their own guts. And then because it's in the children, the unborn fetuses, now you have a hole-poking toxin that can be in their brain because there's no blood-brain barrier. Now we add Roundup. Most of the Bt corn is also sprayed with Roundup. What does Roundup do? If you could design a chemical to damage or destroy the foundations of health, it would be glyphosate. And the bigger Roundup has a lot of poisons in it. The chief poison is glyphosate. I will tell you some of the qualities of Roundup and glyphosate. And this is going to be, what I'm about to say is highly encouraging for you to do something, to eat organic. If you avoid GMOs, you will eliminate one big source of Roundup. But starting in 2006, Monsanto had the brilliant idea of expanding its markets by convincing farmers to spray Roundup just before harvest on the grains and the beans. So it's higher on oats than it is on soybeans. It's higher in hummus because it's sprayed on chickpeas and lentils and peas, beans, wheat. So you can have a non-GMO project verified loaf of bread that's been sprayed with Roundup 3 days before harvest. So now I'm going to tell you what Roundup does. And so I told you behavior change messaging. It isn't pretty, but it works. Roundup was originally patented as a descaler to clean the mineral buildup in pipes and boilers in factories. Because it was a chelator. It grabbed all the minerals and stripped it. Now, what does it do to us? It binds with minerals, making them unavailable. Any biochemists in the room? Minerals are cofactors for all of these different biochemical pathways. So if you have a bunch of material ready to function, to produce enzymes, to detox the body, but you don't have a certain mineral, they're all on strike. If the mineral is there, but it's bound with glyphosate, still on strike. So many diseases are mineral deficient diseases. That whole long list, we could go back to people who are experts at mineral deficiency, and they could probably link the list of diseases and charts, many of them to mineral deficiency, which could be related to glyphosate. Glyphosate was also patented as an antibiotic. But unlike all the other antibiotics that we know, it preferentially kills the beneficial bacteria. The lactobacillus, the bifidus, not the salmonella, botulism, E. coli. So when you look at a model of human microbiome and you feed it food for 3 weeks and then you put Roundup in, it destroys the biodiversity, cuts down the short-chain fatty acids, changes what it produces, increases the pathogens. And I talked to an expert at the microbiome, and I said, okay, let's go through those 28 conditions that people said they got better from. I'll name a condition, and you tell me if the changes in the microbiome could have predicted it. Every single one. So that's the first two things, minerals and antibiotics. It also, I know it's really serious, it also is a toxin to the mitochondria. And for those who are involved in the body, it damages the actin, which is the structural components of the cells, and the mitochondria collapse. Mitochondria is the energy centers. Remember the fatigue and the brain fog? But mitochondria basically run the body. When you want to tell whether someone is old or young, you look at the two tissues. The only difference they could find is the damaged or the undamaged mitochondria. There's a mitochondria theory of aging. There's a mitochondria theory of cancer. And mitochondria is damaged from glyphosate and Roundup. It also, Monsanto advertised that it blocks the shikimate pathway, which is what plants use, and we don't have a shikimate pathway. And that's all it does, folks. It just blocks the shikimate pathway so we can eat it. You can drink it. It's safer than table salt. This is what they said. The shikimate pathway is used by our gut bacteria to produce the precursors to serotonin, melatonin, dopamine. Remember anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, insomnia, suicide, attention deficit? All those can be related to these neurotransmitters. Glyphosate can mess up hormones and change the balance of testosterone and estrogen. It can cause suppression of digestive enzymes. It can block the intelligent networking between cells. So cells can't talk to each other as much. It's called gap junctions, drops by 50%. It's a cause of cancer. It causes genotoxicity, meaning it causes mutations in our DNA, which can also lead to cancer. It can cause birth defects. And I'm only getting started. So you see, it basically hits all of these fundamental foundations of health, and it's throughout our food supply. So when I interview pediatricians like Michelle Perro, who's in my last film that I did with Amy Hart called Secret Ingredients, And we have all these people switch to organic food, and 2 autistic boys are no longer on the spectrum. And in a clinic, 92 out of 92 infertile couples who are put on an organic diet all have kids. And people who had cancer and skin problems and mental problems and all these different things completely reverse, and you meet them and you hear the doctors explain why, and you see the animations of what happens in the body. And when I talked to Michelle Perot, who's a pediatrician for 40 years, she said in the early 2000s, everything changed. All of these diseases that she would never see in children came. The same healing modalities would not work. She couldn't figure it out. She happened to be reading my book and saw a picture of the gut that happens in a rat with GMOs and said, this is happening in the children. Started taking kids onto organic diets and they could get better, whereas before they weren't getting better. And when they put the autistic kid on an organic diet, the whole family does it. So the father's kidneys problem starts going away. The daughter's ADHD goes away. The mother loses weight. She's not treating them, she's changing the diet. I was in MIT giving a talk with a professor there. And I asked the question, how many people have noticed a change? A woman stood up and said, my 6.5-year-old was violent and out of control. They wanted to kick him out of school. I saw your movie, this was an earlier one, Genetic Roulette. I changed his diet, all the problems went away. I said, how long did it take? She said, 1 week. Then she paused and said, within a month, I had a new son. I talked to a grandmother who was volunteering at a booth at a conference where I was speaking, at my booth, and she said, I have to tell you a story. I saw the movie Genetic Roulette, and I thought of my grandson. He had trouble breathing, and he was always acting out in school. Every day, the school would call home. I said to my son, her grandson's father, and check out this sales technique. Use this sparingly. She said to her son, if there's anything you ever do in your life because I ask, please watch this film. So that was like pulling all the chips on the table. She watched the film, said, okay, we're changing his diet. She told me the breathing problems went away. The school never calls home except the day after he eats at the other grandparent's house. So kids are super sensitive, and some people are more sensitive than others. So eating organic is an amazing foundational step in health. So if you want to go vegan, if you know vegans who are eating just standard chickpeas and lentils, and tell them about it. Show them the movie, Secret Ingredients. It's not enough to change the diet without paying attention to these fundamental pieces. So the good news is it's working, and Roundup is now the subject of some very powerful class action lawsuits. I highly recommend going to our site at responsibletechnology.org and watching the 5-part interview that I do with the chief attorney, because Monsanto was forced to turn over millions of pages of documents, and we blow the whistle, boy. My goodness. I'll give you one story from that interview. One story. Actually, I learned it after the interview. I think it was the last interview I did with him. When you release a weed killer, you have to do an absorption test on human skin from cadavers and see how much gets absorbed in. So they took Roundup, applied it to cadaver skin, and 10% got in, which is 3.3 times the legal limit. So they didn't tell the EPA. So they cut skin off the cadaver and they put it in an oven and they baked it a long time. So you know how meat gets when it's tough, or maybe some of you don't, just trust me. And then you take it, then they took that overcooked human skin and they froze it. And then they added the Roundup. I said, oh, hardly any got in. And that's what they reported to the EPA, the hardly ever. That's how it's amazing what they got away with. But the jury heard it, and the juries wanted to punish Monsanto for consistently lying. So in the last trial, The compensatory damage, meaning what they actually hurt their clients, there's a couple, was 55 million. The punitive damage awarded by the jury was 2 billion. Now, the judge brought it down to about 80 million total. I happened to go out to dinner the night with the couple and the lawyers the night that they got the award. It was surreal. I was sitting next to them. It's like, how do you feel? I don't know, it's kind of weird. We just got to $2 billion, 2.055 billion. The 0.055 was 55 million. It's like, the woman said to me, I can't think numbers that high. Well, the judge reduced it so they could. So, but there's 42,700 people waiting for their day in court. And so the Bayer, which bought Monsanto, their stock price just plummeted from the first lawsuit, and now they're in settlement discussions, so we'll see what happens. All right, so I'm going to go to, where we're going to go from here. Well, these are just more devastating, horrible things that happen from GMOs. Damage to the liver. Here's testicles that changed from pink to blue when rats were fed genetically modified Roundup ready soybeans. I usually take this moment to get a drink of water or something so people can just marinate in this. So I'm going to just go through. Oh yeah, I spoke at the Parliament, the European Parliament, with a number of scientists, and this scientist from Russia gave me these slides. So these are Russian-speaking rats, and they were fed GMO soy starting 2 weeks before they got pregnant, and more than half of their babies died within 3 weeks, compared to 10% when the mothers ate non-GM soy. And they were also smaller and could not reproduce. And then hamsters were also fed GM soy for 3 generations, and most also became infertile and were smaller and had many had hair growing in their mouths. It was a birth defect. All right, so I'm going to go, one last new finding before I go into the new GMOs. Dr. Skinner from Washington State University injected Roundup into a pregnant rat and found that the rat was fine, actually it was mice. In fact, the mouse was fine, the offspring were fine, but the grandchildren suffered. And the great-grandchildren were worse. And he never tested the great-great-grandchildren. This is epigenetics, where you change gene expression. And so 90% of the great-grandchildren had serious diseases: prostate, kidney, obesity, and real problems during birth. A lot of the mothers, female rats giving birth, died. Some of the babies died. So, how many people feel a greater commitment to eat organic in your life? Raise your hand. See how easy it is? And actually, it is easy. And if you want to share this information with others, do so by sharing the movie Secret Ingredients. It's more powerful than a lecture. You see the people who've done the change, so you have the emotional connection, you have the intellectual understanding. You can go to secretingredientsmovie.com. And I just turned off the thing. All right. And here we are, Secret Ingredients. So, you can take a picture of that if you want. I'm going to now talk about a different danger of GMOs, which after 23 years of doing the same thing, I'm now going to do something else. So I'm going to go way back to the beginning of the presentation. You get to look at all this again. Okay, here we go. I'm going to turn on this. I don't know if the sound is going to work. If it doesn't, I'm going to make a little change. Nothing's working.
If we stop climate change, save our oceans, and protect our soils, we may still lose the natural world we cherish. A quiet invasion is underway, where companies who profit from altering DNA are declaring open season on all parts of nature. Like the gold rush of the Wild West, there is a global gene rush underway, moving from engineering crops to engineering entire ecosystems. From algae to animals, fungus to flowers, bacteria to bees. With genetic engineering techniques such as gene editing often less than ever, nothing is off limits. Once released, GMOs reproduce. Artificial changes can spread through the environment and corrupt the gene. We have no strategies to clean it up. The only thing lasting longer than a permanently altered gene pool is extinction. Last century, the assault of synthetic chemicals polluted nature. Today's genetic assault will replace nature forever. What is the most common outcome of genetic engineering? Surprise side effects. It's not that individuals seek to permanently replace nature with unpredictable laboratory creations. It's thousands upon thousands of labs racing to get their invented organisms out there first. And many governments, including the US, Australia, Argentina, Brazil, and Japan, are eliminating regulations and safety precautions, hoping that GMO companies can make quick profits and dominate. On June 6th, the Trump administration proposed new rules that would make almost every GMO exempt from regulations by the Department of Agriculture. On June 11th, President Trump signed an executive order to further erode government oversight. In addition, it authorizes the U.S. State Department, trade representatives, and other agencies to work together to convince the world to accept GMOs, and by October 9th, have a strategy in place to use the maximum financial, political, and diplomatic pressure to arm-twist the nations of the world into fully accepting America's GMOs. Do you think the citizens of the world will have something to say about it? We do. In fact, we invite you to join the global protest. It's time to blow the whistle. It's too late now. Did you just get
Sitting in the back the whole time.
all living beings and all future generations?
Good. I have to be there in a minute.
Amazing lecture.
I'm on now. Excuse me. All right. What could possibly go wrong? For those that can't see it, this is a drive-through liquor and gun store. So what could possibly go wrong here? First of all, that is the new problem that we're facing. That is unprecedented. You see, we're at a time now in human civilization that was inevitable. We were going to get to this point where we could easily change the nature of nature forever. We could go in there and tinker with the code of life, change the books in the library, and do it for completely positive reasons, but not know what we have done. Perhaps ever, or perhaps we find out and it's a cataclysm or a catastrophe. Someone took bacteria and said, let's take genes into this bacteria that will turn cellulose, plant matter, into alcohol, so that farmers don't have to burn the stubble on their field. They'll gather it all and put it into big barrels and mix it with this bacteria. And then they'll have alcohol, which they can run their tractors with. And then the sludge at the bottom, they'll spread on their fields as fertilizer. It's a brilliant idea in theory. They were 2 weeks away from doing an outdoor field test of this bacteria. And a graduate student got his results back. He spread the fertilizer on a plot of land, or in the laboratory, it was in a dish, and planted wheat seeds, which grew, and then he came in one day, and it was all green slime. The roots and the stems were completely destroyed because of the alcohol that was created by the bacteria. It was still functioning. It rendered the soil infertile. We'll put that one on hold for just a second and place it right here for the implications. The graduate student's advisor, Elaine Ingham, told me that she was approached by someone from the EPA who told her about a secret experiment where they released genetically engineered bacteria and then tested it to see how far it would travel. And they found it in all of these monitoring stations 11 miles away. But they continued to monitor it year after year, and eventually it was found everywhere on the planet. Now we go back to this. What could have happened if they sent this around to farmers? What if they just placed it in one place? Bacteria travel, but they're also promiscuous, and they swap genes. So they get together, and it's like a seed swapping. It's like, oh, you take this, I'll take this, and then they go to the next one, and they swap this. So we may have ended up creating hosts of bacteria that will turn cellulose into alcohol. Now, we're just understanding what the microbiome does to the human being. I mean, if you haven't heard of fecal transplants, you take fecal matter from one sick animal and put it in a healthy animal, and that animal gets sick. You take healthy fecal matter into a sick animal, and it gets healthy, fat to skinny. It's a code. It's the crosstalk. There's coded information in our microbiome that reacts to our state of health that helps create the state of health. A microbiome expert said that 80 to 90% of the diseases in the United States, or in the world, they start with dysbiosis, imbalance of the gut bacteria. So what happens if some of this released bacteria gets in our gut or swaps genes and we change the nature of our gut? There's another bacteria that was, and this was in the early 90s, what I just described to you. In the late 80s, there was bacteria that was altered so it would not perform its magic trick. This bacteria, Pseudomonas syringae, is brilliant. It is such a superhero. It aligns the molecules of water, and with its proteins, it creates frost and ice and snow at temperatures way higher than it would normally be created. They use it in snowmaking for skiing and snowboarding. It's in the air, and it creates clouds. It's on strawberries, and it creates frost and kills the strawberries. So, well-intentioned scientists said, let's change the nature of nature and turn it so that it doesn't do its job. And so they sprayed it on a field, and it did not create the frost. And then a judge told them to destroy it, so they incinerated it, fortunately. But that was in the late 80s, before we knew that by doing so, if it had spread, if it had become dominant and edged out the original superhero strains, it could have changed the weather patterns on the planet. These are two types of genetically engineered bacteria that I know about. And there's now genetically engineered bacteria that's going to be commercialized next year for farmers. And probiotics for the soil soon after. Let's talk about fish. There's genetically engineered salmon, engineered to increase their size quickly. So they put in a gene that produces a growth hormone and one that doesn't let it turn off. Normally salmon shut off their growth hormones for part of the year. These frankenfish, they get big quick. So they can go to market in 18 months instead of 3 years, perhaps, according to the theory of the Aqua Bounty company. And they have permission to grow the eggs in Prince Edward Island in Canada. They're selling it in Canada. They expect to sell it in the United States unlabeled next year. Not to mention the fact that it increases IGF-1, which is linked to cancer. It increases allergic reactions in blood from people who have allergic reactions to salmon. But they used such small numbers in their tests, it wasn't statistically significant. If you're going to change the gene pool, use more than 6 fish in your studies. But these other scientists decided to create their own similar genetically engineered fish that grew quickly and put them in tanks in Canada. And they put just the frankenfish or just the natural fish or combinations, fed them all they wanted, everything was peaceful. Then they reduced the amount of food. Fast-growing fish are hungry. These fish got aggressive and cannibalistic. They started killing their competitors. They started traveling to parts of this tank, which was designed to look like an ocean, to areas where the normal fish wouldn't travel. They were aggressive, cannibalistic, and violent. It caused population crashes or complete extinctions. Another fish, a Japanese Medaka, was genetically engineered, and it only survived 70% of the time, but it had a mating advantage because of the size would grow bigger, the females would choose the males, and so there was a greater tendency for the females to choose the males, but there was a 30% less viability of the offspring. So in Purdue University, they took these elements and put it into a computer program and introduced in the computer 60 genetically engineered Medaka into a population of 60,000. In 40 generations, there were none left. Complete extinction. So if the salmon escape, are we going to end up with an extinction of the salmon or roves of adolescent, voracious, violent gangs of fish changing the makeup of the ocean? There's a gene-edited technique called gene drives, where normally male, female, 50% of the traits here, 50% of the traits there, they force all offspring to get the traits, but they also pass on the genetic engineering apparatus to the offspring so that their offspring, all of them get the trait. So their offspring, all of them get the trait. So they can change the nature of nature for an entire species. What do they want to use it for? To wipe out species. They want to wipe out, well, there's rats in this island that had no natural predator. We've tried everything else. Let's destroy them by introducing a genetically modified rat. How did those rats get there? In the hulls of ships. What would happen if the genetically engineered rat goes somewhere else on the hulls of ships? Where does it stop? They want to eliminate certain mosquitoes because they carry disease. But genetic engineering is a leaky technology. What if the genes transferred to other insects or even other kingdoms? What if it, when you genetically engineer, things happen that aren't supposed to happen? So gene editing, what is it? You create little molecular scissors with a guide. So the guide says, okay, look for something that looks like this. Okay, go in there and cut. It's looking for sequences in the genes. Find the sequence, make the cut. It's to remove genes. It's to change and alter genes. And what happens is, that's as far as we can control. So at that point, you've cut where you want to, hopefully, but you may cut in 50 other places up and down the genome, causing problems. Once you make the cut, it's out of your hands. The cellular mechanism of the cell rejoins them. But for some reason, it grabs DNA in the area. Like when you do it in a petri dish, they use goat serum and cow serum. So they have goat DNA in mouse DNA now, because it's just grabbed some DNA, some some cow DNA gets put in there, including retroviruses. What's a retrovirus? HIV, hepatitis, viruses that get into the DNA. That could be in these gene-edited products. There was hornless cattle created from gene editing. It was a big success. It was the poster child of the biotech industry. Hornless cattle. Why do they want to create hornless cattle? To put them all in tight factory farms. But they said there was no side effects, and so therefore we need no oversight, no safety assessments, no regulatory reviews for any gene-edited animal because this proves it's safe. That was their thinking. A couple of months ago, the FDA wrote an article saying, oh, guess what? We sequenced your gene, dudes, and guess what? There was bacteria in every cell of those cows. Bacteria that was used as part of the genetic engineering process. And it contained 2 antibiotic-resistant genes that rendered antibiotic resistance to ampicillin, neomycin, and something else, kanamycin, which are used. Antibiotic-resistant diseases kill. They cause amputations, they cause death. I heard 50,000 deaths a year. I don't know if it's true, but it's high numbers. And now every cell of those cows has an antibiotic-resistant gene. What if it transfers to bacteria in the gut? They killed the cows in Brazil that they were growing. They were going to implement these perfectly designed hornless cattle. When they discovered the problem, they killed them. If they hadn't discovered the problem, they would be introduced. So you see, the technology is not ready for prime time. But the biotech industry is trying to convince the world that it is. They use the same rhetoric they used years ago, safe and predictable, better than breeding, and it's not. But you see, when you release these, as you saw in the film, you are playing with the nature of nature forever. Maybe there'll be some kind of science fiction future where we can go in and with ray guns get back our natural gene pool, but I don't know of any technology and can't conceive of one. Obviously, the ray guns was a terrible idea. So, what do we do? I feel like I'm back 23 years ago when I first heard about GMOs from a scientist who blew the whistle, and I had to create a strategy, and what was out there wasn't working. And what we did is worked. So now we have to create a whole new strategy. We need to look at international treaties like the World Trade Organization and the Cartagena Protocol Conference on Biosafety. We need to look at federal governments, state governments, local governments, curricula in schools, scientific advisory boards, institutional review boards, liability laws. We need to bring it to the religious organizations, to the indigenous people, to the moms. We need to bring it to everyone. Why? Because the math is not as simple as convincing 5 or 6 or 10% of a population to change their diet. Because if you get people to eat healthy and eat organic, you're not going to stop the bacteria or the algae or the fungus or the butterflies. There's some good news. And the good news is we have more people right now than any time in history focusing on planetary survival. In this regard, global climate change is a good thing for us. Because there's already 10 million students that walked out. There's already half the population that's alerted to it. Thinking about planetary survival, thinking about humans' impact through technology that could create extinction or dramatic effects downstream. So our plan is not to invent a new movement with new people and new organizations, but to seed all of the movements out there. The climate change movement, the ocean movement, the animal rights movement, gardeners, birders, moms, religious, nature lovers. Create the information that's needed so that they can share it with others. If they don't want to send people to Protect Nature Now, we'll give them everything we have, no brand, they can create their own website. We're not in competition, we have to build a movement quickly. Protect Nature Now is the name of the website. And we don't even ask for money on it because we don't want someone to hesitate sending their tribe to our landing page and then we receive money, although we need money. And if you want to make a donation to the Institute for Responsible Technology, that is the number one thing we need right now. We almost ran out of money and had to close shop after 16 years in October. We didn't have enough money I had to lay someone off, I couldn't pay myself, we had to completely contact everyone we knew. Well, we raised enough money till the end of the year. But that, I mean, if we just survive, if we're on fumes, we're not going to be able to do this. We need to hire someone who's going to be in contact with 1,000 organizations. We need to hire writers, fundraisers. We need to build an organization. So one way that you can help, if you'd like to make a donation, I have forms up here. Another way, share Protect Nature Now with others. If you have a way of getting information out to a lot of people, make sure you sign up for regular information so that anytime we produce new information, you can get it. Remember those bacteria stories I just told? Well, I've scripted the next video about the bacteria stories. Because people ask, they saw that, well, how bad can it be? Well, eliminating terrestrial life, terrestrial plant life and changing the weather patterns, that's pretty bad. And so we want to get the word out. This is very new. We released this film in October because we were trying to get it out before the October 9th deadline for the US government. And we need to throw a lot of firepower at this. And the thing is, I'm actually very confident because I'm looking at your faces and it's kind of like, let me get this, see if I have this right. Oh my God, never thought of that before. That's really bad. We need to do something. Oh my God, it's like, what can I do? Something like that energy, right? That means it works. That means that there's enough information here, because I'm, strategic communicator is my job. Behavior change messaging was what I worked on for 23 years. What can I say to enliven a group to say, okay, we get it, we want to do something, what can we do? I don't know all the solutions yet. I have to work with all these experts, create a basket of solutions, create a budget, approach these big granting organizations with a multi-million-dollar thing. It's totally different than just convincing people not to feed their kids genetically engineered soy. I may be speaking to the UN at some point. Who knows? It's got to be big. It's got to be. But one thing is clear, and that is human consciousness. When we saturate human consciousness with a new idea, there's an awakening of activity and creativity and appropriate behavior that results. So when I get the word out about the dangers of GMOs, a mom, Zen Honeycutt, starts Moms Across America and has groups marching in 172 July 4th parades. Someone else, another person has a group of autistic moms. They get together and share our stuff and then change the diet of them. We just bring the information out and groups and individuals make changes. So of all of the things, whether it's international treaties or the local, state, and federal governments, of all the things, the number one is to craft the message so that it's powerful and drives forth action. I'm very curious what your reaction is to that film. Now, you didn't watch the film in isolation. You were it's in the middle of a lecture that's packed with a lot of other things. I understand that. So it's not a pure test. But does anyone have a reaction they want to share when they saw the film? Yes? Utterly freaked out. Now, I want to ask you something. Like when I sometimes give a lecture and I'll say, and this is before this freak out thing. It was just dealing with the health dangers. And I'll say, how many people are feeling grief? All right, let's do it. How many people are feeling some grief about this? Sadness? How many people are feeling fear? How many people are feeling anger? Okay, so I'm going to suggest this. Obviously, we digest information in different ways. I'm going to suggest that you digest this in a way that empowers, that turns the tide from victim to victor, so that we decide that we're going to be in charge, that we're going to take charge. So many aspects of our world keep us as victims or recipients of whatever the corporations cook up. Here, it's got to be not on our watch. It's got to be a situation where the information says, okay, I've heard it, now I'm stepping up. Now I'm going to share it, now I'm going to do something about it. We don't have a ton of different things to do, raise money, share the information, talk to others. We don't have a lot of choices right now for you. It's new, it's a new movement. But that's a good start. The key is, if I leave people just freaked out, sometimes it means nothing gets done. So I'm trying to figure out this messaging. It's freak out material, but I want people to do something at the end of the film, to do something at the end of each film, and to feel good that they're protecting nature. So I'll say one thing. Imagine that you could contribute to protecting nature now. Imagine that you could contribute in some way to protect all living beings and all future generations. None of our ancestors ever had that capacity. No one in history has ever had the capacity to do such good, because there has never been technologies that can do such harm. We have the capacity to step up as heroes in this generation. We have the capacity to bless all future generations, human and otherwise. This is the opportunity right now. This is what nature is asking for. And you can hear it in your great-great-grandchildren, unborn. You can hear it in the animals, in the insects, in the plants. Somehow, and this is more mystical, but it's what I feel in my bones. If we're stepping up to protect nature, somehow nature comes and supports. Somehow the fact that we're all one is not just a quote, but there's a reality. So as a leader in this movement, I have felt that energy run through my veins for more than 2 decades. And here's another reason to get involved. It is an amazing advanced technique for personal evolution to step up and work on behalf of nature. See? Cannot even contain himself. So I want to use this as an opportunity before I take questions. No matter what area that is calling you in your life, whether it's this or plant-based diet or anything, if there's something that's calling you to be larger. My t-shirt that has my slogan that I had created says, "Think huge." Thinking big is so last century. The world has huge problems. And the world will step up to support huge thinkers. And from my own experience, traveling giving 1,000 lectures in 45 countries, 2 books, 4 movies, training 1,500 people, creating a movement around the world, when I speak on behalf of nature and I think for the globe, oh my God, what an advanced technique for personal growth that is. So I want to encourage you, that's one secret, that's a powerful secret. So I want to encourage you to step up in your own lives in whatever way that is calling you. And in the meantime, think what you can do to protect nature now. Thank you very much.
Time for more questions.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go through them.
Thank you. I have some donation forms that I'm going to leave here at the front table, but do you have them there? They were there a moment ago. Well, we had some donation forms, but Monsanto made their way in. Here they are, I got them. I think, yeah. But I'll be taking questions now, and I'm also welcoming comments because we're new at this Protect Nature Now business, and so I want anything you want to share. So in the back, yes.
Can we show the movie to groups?
Yes, you can show Protect Nature Now anywhere you want. Here's the thing, there's a social media campaign in there, which we're trying to use it to help go viral. Share a picture of something you want to protect, your family, your dog, a picture of your favorite animal, whatever. And there's a link at the bottom for further resources. There we have interviews with scientists and citations and reports and a lot of deep information, some of which we're going to turn into short videos again. So you can camp out at that site for as long as you want and share everything. And you can also, if you want those assets, you can take them and put them on your site and reproduce them. Next question. Yes?
Could you please tell us again what crops are sprayed with Monsanto?
Okay. If you go to responsibletechnology.org, there is a report of what glyphosate levels were found in different foods. You see, the US government tests and reports on all of the other weed killers, but not Roundup or not glyphosate, because they've been in bed with Monsanto for so long. So independent groups have been doing it. We take all of theirs, create a page. You just sign up and you'll get a link to that page, and we'll update that with every new research report comes out. We have pet food levels and cat food levels and raw ingredients and breakfast cereals and all that. The GMOs are soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa. Those are all Roundup ready. There's also zucchini, yellow squash, papaya from Hawaii. There's also apples and potatoes that are engineered not to turn brown when you slice them. They use a technology which literally could reprogram your DNA if you eat the apple or potato. Don't eat it. There's also salmon, and there's also animal products from animals that have been fed the GMOs, which is most of the animals are fed the soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa. So we have all that at responsibletechnology.org. Next question or comment? Yes?
Is the soil ever going to be recovered from the glyphosate? It's into the dirt.
So Monsanto got convicted of false advertising on their label of Roundup saying it was biodegradable. So they stopped doing that in the United States and continued to do that in Europe until they got convicted there too by the French Supreme Court. And they got a whopping fine of 28,000 euros. So it was a good business decision to continue to lie. The Roundup or the glyphosate will degrade depending on a number of aspects of the soil. The bio content, the pH, etc. The longest recorded half-life, meaning the time it takes to degrade into half, was 22 years. But it's usually way less than that, within a year or two, something like that. And it can remain bound in the soil, but in the case of adding phosphate fertilizer, it can unbind with the minerals and then become a weed killer again. There are people that are testing different remediation strategies. I'm doing some research, or helping create research by putting people together. There's bioremediation with, bacteria, and there's remediation about that things can absorb the Roundup. So there's successes, but it isn't yet commercialized and available. Yes, you're next.
Could you shed light or talk about or share the statistics about how GMO products disproportionately affect low-income areas and people of color?
It's a good question. Most GMOs are in processed foods, and most processed foods have GMOs. Soy derivatives, corn derivatives, canola oil, cottonseed oil, sugar. And if you eat unprocessed foods, there's very few from the produce aisle that are GMO. You have the corn, tofu might be in the produce oil, edamame, zucchini, yellow squash, apples, and potatoes. The rest is non-GMO. But there's food deserts in some of the low-income areas where you don't get the produce, you get the processed packaged foods. So you get the GMOs, and then you get all the other bad things that happen with processed packaged foods. You don't have the access to organic, because it's not just non-GMO that we're pursuing now, because organic is necessary. So we have a partner, Azure Standard, which sends trucks to 2,500 drop points. And they were promoting our film, Secret Ingredients, to its members, asking them to show the film. And because they have their own trucks, they can ship bags of organic oats at a discount, where they don't have to do UPS because it'll be too expensive. So we're looking for ways. We have a 90-day lifestyle upgrade program, how to do things on a budget, how to do things to save time. So people watch the film, and then they can go to the 90-day lifestyle upgrade program, and over 90 days become more successful at an organic lifestyle. That doesn't solve the problem of low income. It just makes it a little easier. And some of the things that people are doing to save money are amazing. I talked to one doctor who has the 92 out of 92 infertile couples who have kids now. She goes, she gets together with 6 other mothers on Sunday. They have a great time, and they make like 7 dishes together. And then they all just share it, put it in their freezer or whatnot, and that's part of what they eat during the day, during the week. And it's a social scene, it's less expensive, they can do things, it's great. It's a time saver, money saver, etc. You had a question over here.
Yes, I was wondering, of all the countries you've traveled to, what population would you say is most proactive, and they look the healthiest, and they're ready to really make a change in their life?
It's a good question. And you'd think Europe, because back in 1999, the gag order was lifted on Dr. Arpad Pusztai, who had done research on GMOs and found that it was inherently dangerous and seriously dangerous. And more than 700 articles were written in a single month in the UK alone, which caused this big warring factions to line up for and against GMOs. And that created the food companies within 10 weeks saying, okay, no more GMOs in Europe, because it was too much of a liability. But they continued to sell it in the United States where no one reported on it. So in Europe, it's not illegal to eat GMOs or to feed people GMOs. It's just banned by the food companies because of the alertness and awareness there. But they still use Roundup. They still have GMOs in the animal feed. So even in Europe, in the city dwellers, there's glyphosate in the urine. Not as much as in the United States. One of the most aware countries was Zambia. And what happened was, Zambia was one of the 5 countries that was struck with a big famine, and the US was sending aid. The US, unlike every other country, sends the corn and soy because it's to promote US agriculture, whereas others send money. So by sending the food, they kind of destroy local agriculture to support US. But the Zambian people said, well, we have a law, we don't allow GMOs. Can you send us non-GMOs? And they said no. America said no. Some of the other countries said, well, can you mill the corn so it's not grown in our countries, like otherwise it could be seeds? The US said no. So Zambia said, we're not going to take it. And they got food from other places. It wasn't a problem. But it kind of blew the whistle It blew the lid off the lie that GMOs are needed to feed the hungry when a country that was starving turned it down. So what happened was they sent professors and senators and congressmen, and Colin Powell was convinced to tell the head of the head of the Jesuits in the Vatican to try and stop 2 priests from talking about GMOs. I interviewed the priests, and there was all these lies told about them. And I talked to one of the cabinet ministers who, during the time of the crisis, was the agriculture minister, and he was introduced to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Ann Veneman, and someone said, he's from Zambia. She looked at him and said, backward country, and walked away. And, they just went after him so heavy, so hard, and they stuck to their guns. So I wrote this really long article about the dangers of GMOs that appeared in South Africa in a magazine called Noseweek. It was an investigative journalist. And I got contacted by a major government paper in Zambia. They wanted to put the entire article in their government paper. And they did. You open it up, it was an entire 2-page spread with a picture of the president, because it vindicated the country. So when I visited Zambia, I was like brought to the national radio station, brought to the national TV station. I addressed the House of Chiefs. And I said, I am from the United States. So first of all, I apologize. So everyone in Zambia knew about GMOs. People say, what do you do? I'm talking about GMOs. They're the things where, oh yeah, we know what a GMO is. It's like they all just stopped me. Everyone knew what a GMO was in Zambia. Yes?
Since it took so long for Monsanto to be like disclosed, what do you think about the organic foods that we buy? How organic are they, in fact?
It's a good question. There's, the organic standards are very clear. They're very good. They're not perfect. And they're similar around the world. The enforcement is not the same around the world. So I was in China and I said, okay, how good is Chinese organic? And I got a very unsatisfactory answer. It's like, well, if it's the government that's the certifying agency, they're really concerned about their image and they're going to be really good. But if it's someone else, you don't really know. And we don't know who's the certifying agency. So I would say organic, it does not allow GMOs, it doesn't allow Roundup. Sometimes there's fraud, but very few times. Sometimes there's contamination. The Non-GMO Project doesn't care about glyphosate. So sometimes you'll see organic and the Non-GMO Project on the same package. Why would that be the case? Organic does not allow GMOs. Here's the advantage. Organic does not require testing for GMO contamination. Non-GMO Project does. So now you have no GMOs allowed, no Roundup allowed, and if there's any at-risk ingredients, it's been tested. The system has been tested, not every single product. So that's the gold standard to get both. But if you had to choose between organic and Non-GMO Project, which one do you choose? Non-GMO. Oh, organic. So pay attention. And this is in the film, Secret Ingredients. You eat non-GMO, it could still be sprayed with Roundup. You eat organic, it's not allowed to have GMOs. It may have little contamination. Even the Non-GMO Project may have a little contamination. They have a 0.9% threshold. So if you had to choose again between organic and non-GMO, what is it? Organic. Thank you, there you go, organic. And not everyone knows that because we were so good at getting people to eat non-GMO, now we sort of have to deal with our own exuberance, yeah.
I have a question that, in my thinking, that there is some world thing to depopulate the planet. And 90% of the corn on the planet is GMO corn. Correct me if I'm wrong, but couldn't they create one virus to wipe out all that corn all at once?
Well, because there's a GMO in corn doesn't mean that the corn is all susceptible to the same virus. A virus might be attacking a certain type of corn, but many types of corn are genetically engineered. But when they did take over corn and soy, they went from, let's say, 40 or 400. The amount of diversity went from several hundred types to just a handful. I forget the exact numbers. I used to know because I interviewed a PhD who did his dissertation on it. So you end up reducing the diversity, and that reduces the food security. Now, to go a step further, there's something called terminator technology, which the international community stopped, but Monsanto was really into using it, where you integrate that as part of your GMO, and it gives birth, the soybean plant gives birth to sterile offspring. So they got this terminator technology because they were aiming at the 1.9, I think, billion farmers that save seeds, because they give nothing to the seed companies. So they wanted to eliminate the practice of saving seeds around the planet. Now, when you have that many billions of farmers saving seeds, think of the diversity. Now you're at a time of global climate change. You need that diversity. You need something that will work under the changed salty conditions, dry conditions, wet conditions. And when you eliminate that diversity, you eliminate the security. And the biotech industry was willing to risk global food security to sell more out of their catalogs. So there's so many pieces in this puzzle. Thank you for bringing that up.
You could take that one step further, and they did the diversity down so that they could eliminate all corn.
Well, I'll take it 2 steps further. These are stories that I rarely share because I don't have substantial evidence. It's what people have told me. And I'm pretty close to the source. In one case, a person told me that he, in the 1970s, got on a computer with the modem in the 70s and ended up on this site where he read that the CIA, USDA, and Monsanto were going to work together to create termination seeds that they could drop into other countries to cause famine, to force those countries to submit to U.S. pressure. And he told me that after doing this, it was probably at his high school when he did it, a few days later he was called to the principal's office, and there were some men in suits. And they were from the CIA, and they wanted to know what he had read. And he had to sign a whole bunch of forms that he would never tell anyone. And he didn't tell anyone until he saw all of it on Nova. And when he saw it on Nova, he said, okay, my gag order is lifted. But no one could find the Nova episode anymore. But he told me. Someone else told me that they were talking to someone before GMOs were created, someone from the government, who said, we're going to create GMOs because we want other countries to use them so we can turn on and off their food supply, right, to control them. And they said, well, you're trying to promote it in the US first too. He says, yeah, we have to demonstrate to the other countries that it's good, and then we'll be able to control their food supply. So it isn't necessarily prove the depopulation, because food it can be a weapon whether you're doing that or not. I'm not taking a position on that, but it certainly is an interesting geopolitical way of manipulation and control in ways that we wouldn't have thought about 100 years ago. Yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap up here. Let me just finish by saying this. You're in a very special situation. Many of you, how many people are going through programs here? Raise your hand. Okay. And how many people have already made significant changes in their diet and their lives? Almost everyone. So we're very conscious compared to the rest of the country, and probably many of you have already, let's say, run out your welcome among certain people who run the other way, or you have this kind of de facto like, okay, we're going to agree not to talk about these things, right? People ask me, how can I tell my spouse about GMOs, or how can I tell my daughter or my parents? I say, you don't. Let me do it. Show them the film. And I was just interviewing on my live Facebook, which you can catch on our Facebook on Responsible Technology. I was interviewing a fireman who was really sparking with his fellow firemen because he was eating healthy and they were not. And eating together was part of that culture. And they would change off and one person would cook for the others and he was eating alone or eat his own stuff. And it just got to a point where he couldn't do it anymore. So one day he said, hey, I got a film, you want to watch it after dinner? Sure. He played the film Genetic Roulette, my previous film. And they all went, oh my God, I've been feeding this to my kids. And they all got the message. So I'd like to recommend that you use our tools in your own personal evangelical world of getting people to eat healthy so that it's less of a burden on you and less of a burden on your relationships. And so you can go to secretingredientsmovie.com. I think I have 3 copies of the DVD if anyone still uses a DVD. And I also want to suggest that you go to protectnaturenow.com and do something with that website, whether it's to share it on your social media, read the details on the resource page, do something. And to make the commitment tonight, because I could tell you from the human experience, human condition, if there's motivation now, and you say, I'll think about what I want to do later, then there's a drop-off and then a complete petering out. And then it's like, well, maybe I should have done something a year ago when I heard about it. So I'd like to recommend before you go to bed tonight, maybe before you leave the room, make a decision about what you want to do and then be part of that solution so that you don't leave as a victim. You're starting the process of being the victor and protecting all living beings and all future generations. Thank you all for your time.
So what I'm going to do is, Jeffrey is gracious and not pushy, so he doesn't want me to pass this around, but I'm going to leave it back by the water fountain. This man is doing some of the most important work on the planet today. There's no question about that in my mind, and hope none of yours. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you.